Thanks for tuning in to our seller interview series. Up today, we've got an Amazon FBA business for sale in the home and kitchen niches. Created in September 2017, this business makes an average of $29,261 per month in net profit, and the listing number for this business is 46948. Now, we do these interviews to give potential buyers more information about both the seller and the asset they're looking to purchase. We hope these insights are helpful for you in making a buying decision. We've got the seller with us today to go through the business and cover everything from niche selection to traffic and monetization. Thanks for coming on, Josh.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you here. Really looking forward to speaking with you. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a quick summary of the business. So this business was built in September 2017. This business has average monthly revenue of $128,101 and is producing an average net profit of $29,261, and that's based on an 8-month average. Included in the sale of the business are the Seller Center account with 15 SKUs, domain and all-site content and files, trademark, social media accounts, SOPs, and supplier contracts and relationships. All right, now that we have that introduction done, let's go ahead and dig into this interview. So, can you tell me a little bit about your background in building and running online businesses?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to. My wife and I started this business together when we were here in New Zealand, and we've both been familiar with working online. I have a fairly successful YouTube channel, and my wife was Korea's #1 travel blogger for quite some time. So moving into physical distribution or physical products seemed like a natural progression for us back in September. And we'd first heard about FBA in 2014 when we lived in Bali. A great friend of ours introduced us to that. But it took us a few years before we finally had the time and the resources to commit to developing an FBA business.
Great. So let's back up a little bit. When you were getting into the FBA sort of world, what made you choose FBA as a business model to pursue?
Well, we were at that time in 2014, we were living in Bali, Indonesia, and we were running a recycle or repurposed furniture business. So what we were doing, we were purchasing furniture that had been made from old boats that were being decommissioned or had been decommissioned, old trucks, old houses, and if you've ever been to Indonesia, or anyone out there that's listening has ever been to Indonesia, you'll know that they're an incredibly resourceful and artistic people. And so we love the idea of repurposing things, trying to make them last a bit longer, or if they can't fulfill their original purpose, then we like to see if we can repurpose them. That's an ethos that was probably instilled in me by my father, and we've carried that on through to our FBA business.
Why did you choose the niche that you're working in?
We love the idea of saving the environment. I know that that's a bit of a catchphrase these days, but we live that type of lifestyle. We live in a rural area in New Zealand and brought up in a farming community, a very close-knit farming community. Everyone there grows their own vegetables, raises their own stock. By stock, I mean, cows and sheep. And we're very sort of hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And that certainly influenced us in choosing the niche that we're presenting with Empire Flippers.
Let's talk about the reason for sale. So why are you selling the business instead of keeping it and growing it?
Well, for us, we have some other goals that we want to achieve. We want to purchase an orchard or a farm here in New Zealand. Once again, that ties into the lifestyle that my wife and I enjoy. We love that kind of being in touch with nature and being very close to our community, and a lot of people in that area have orchards and farms, and for us, that's the next step in our journey.
Oh, that is pretty exciting stuff. Is there anything you learned from this business that you would apply to future sites or businesses? What did you learn from building this that just seemed to work?
I've learned that you've got to really research. My wife was primarily responsible for digging in deep and finding this opportunity. So we've learned that there's an opportunity cost with anything, and there's risk, of course, but you can minimize your risk through research. That's been huge for us, just learning how truly effective that can be, taking a lot of time to make a decision and not being afraid to turn away a potential product. Even if you've put 20 hours or more into the research of it, you've got to be willing to just say, hey, I don't think it's going to work for whatever reason you may have uncovered through your research, and just be prepared to walk away from it and look for something new. That's been a huge lesson learned. And just to just keep pushing away. There's always challenges. I think it doesn't matter which business you're involved in. It could be Amazon FBA, it could be a farm, it could be clothing, it could be anything. You're going to face unique challenges that are pertinent to that particular niche or industry. So those are two big things that I've taken away from developing this FBA business over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, I think that's really great insight. I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of turning away if they've invested a lot of time in something. But like you said, if it's not the right decision for the business, you just have to be able to let go. So, yeah, really appreciate that. On the flip side, was there anything that you tried that, say, didn't work?
Well, if I go back a little bit further, I did try launching a couple of products years ago. Back in 2014, when I first heard about it, I did try to get a couple of products to market. And for whatever reason, I can't remember exactly now, but I just didn't go ahead. It seemed like it was getting too complicated. Back then, I didn't know much at all. Actually, I really knew next to nothing. And I thought I was getting in a bit over my head.
Yeah. I'm really curious. You've managed to grow this business to quite a large size and you've managed to scale pretty quickly. I was wondering, do you have any sort of tips, tricks, advice for listeners who are really into FBA on how to scale an FBA business to the size of where you are and with the speed of how you've done it? Do you have any sort of helpful insight on that?
Yeah, make sure you don't spend money incorrectly. You've got to prepare your finances in advance. Like I think a lot of people struggle initially with managing finance, but when a business is going through a rapid or experiencing a rapid growth phase, you may find that your finances are going to be strained to the limit. So you really have to have excellent control, self control sometimes to spend the money because FBA businesses like this one, the money comes in. In our situation anyway, it was money like we'd never experienced before. But we squirreled away a lot of it and we also kept up with our day jobs. So we were working day jobs. We were professional musicians actually. So we kept doing that and we were living off that money from our day jobs and just putting everything back into the FBA business. As you can imagine, when it's growing this quickly, your inventory requirements are just, it's like it's exponential. So you might buy 500 products this month. The next minute you have to buy 2,500 and the money hasn't come back yet from Amazon. So you have to be really switched on and be able to predict that, the growth that's coming. That's really important to scaling. Another one is constant research. You'll always be researching. My wife was extremely adept at predicting how much growth. And there was a few times I actually let her down and I was like, oh, I don't think it's going to grow that much. And she's like, no, it's going to grow that much. And I didn't order enough inventory. And sure enough, we ran out. So that's been a learning curve for me. I've got a lot more faith in my wife now with regards to that. So you have to trust sometimes, you have to trust your partner that they understand stuff that you don't, because no matter how intuitive you think you are or how in tune you think you are with your business, you can never know all of it. And you have to trust the people that you're working with and trust that they're making good decisions and keep an open book. Make sure communications are nice and clear. And just go for it. If you believe in what you're doing and you believe your product's going to be a success, just don't give up. Keep going. And just before I stop, make sure that your product can be broadened, so you can go broad and deep. That's really important too. If you want to scale, you need to choose something that maybe you can offer some color variations or some size variations, or maybe you make one thing out of steel and you make another thing out of aluminium. That's how you can scale a business from zero to, a couple of $1 million in turnover within such a short time.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I just think it's so helpful because you guys have really developed such an incredible business, just kind of looking through the data and what you guys have done. So, yeah, for those listening out there, great advice. Definitely listen to what Josh has to say here. So, you were mentioning inventory a little bit. Let's dip into that. Can you describe the process of getting the inventory to Amazon for your business?
Yeah, of course. If we take it one step back, make sure you've got a good supplier. Don't be afraid to sort of kiss a few frogs to find a prince, if I may. Take your time. Make sure you get samples because that's the first part of it. That's the first part in your supply chain. Everything else after that, if you've chosen well, should be fairly straightforward. So the actual process is we contact our suppliers usually kind of 2 times a month. It doesn't have to be that often. And we set our orders up. It's fairly informal. We used to use spreadsheets and stuff to present our orders, but we don't do that anymore. It's just pretty simple. We just say, can we have 500 of that product, 1,000 of that one? And if you've worked with your manufacturer for a while, they know you and they know exactly what you need, and they can do it and they can get it done. And so from the next phase is we contact our freight forwarder. But even that, we don't really have to do that anymore because our manufacturer and freight forwarder, they talk to one another. And the only time that my wife or I have to jump in is if we need something special done. Like maybe we need to ship some products off to the UK and Australia because we're in those marketplaces as well. Then I might just send them a little note, send that many over there and that many over there and that many over there. And the freight forwarder takes care of all the paperwork and everything, and they make sure that it clears customs when it's leaving and when it's arriving at its destination. And it's a fairly seamless and very smooth process, actually. And they take it all the way to Amazon. Yeah, it's really nice. It's gotten easier as the years have passed.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a pretty great setup there, so that's awesome to hear. Moving on to a different subject, what are you currently doing in terms of marketing for the business?
We just use Amazon PPC. For those of you that don't know, that's pay-per-click. That's it. We don't use Facebook or Instagram, although we do have those accounts set up. They're not important in terms of driving traffic.
Okay, great. If you were to keep the business, what are some ways that you would try to grow it?
We'd definitely expand into a few more marketplaces. We'd expand into Europe. At the moment, we're just in the UK because we weren't ready to tackle multiple languages. We've been through that before with the repurposed furniture business that I mentioned earlier. We were dealing in English, 2 Indonesian dialects, and Korean, and that was just a nightmare. So I think we learned a lesson from there, and we were given the opportunity to participate in Amazon Japan with support, but we turned it away because I think it just required resources that we couldn't commit, or we didn't have anyway to commit. So we've stuck with English-speaking marketplaces for now, but I think Europe's got fantastic potential. Also, the Middle East has come online in May 2019. I think there's a lot of potential out there. We used to live out there for several years. We lived in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, and Oman. So we're fairly familiar with the Middle East and the people and the culture there. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and that is how we would increase this business. There's also a lot of potential in Australia. It's a little slow, but they're coming along.
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. Of course, on the flip side, we always ask about the risks. So, what do you think are the biggest risks with the business that a buyer should be aware of?
The biggest risks, always competition. You always have to have an eye out and build your barriers to entry. That's extremely important. So you need to be looking to gain the first mover advantage if you can. You need to differentiate yourself in some way or ways, either through your pricing structure, through your descriptions, customer service, following up, making sure you're always present there. Amazon is a competitive place, make no mistake, but there's certainly room there. I think the way that you can remain ahead of the game is to do certain things better. Always be willing to tweak your listings. For those of you that don't know that are listening to this, maybe you're not familiar with how things work, but your listing is just basically the page that people see when they first come to look at one of your products. So you've got to catch them straight away. You've got to have the best images. You've got to have really good English. Spell check. Look for these little mistakes that creep in. Sometimes you've been at your computer for a few hours and you can't see anything. A Z looks like a T, W looks like, and you're just making these silly little mistakes. And those sorts of things do catch people's attention. And they think, if this person is so lax with their attention to that type of detail, how lax might they be with the product? So you can always, I think, mitigate your risk somewhat by just being diligent, having nice listings, make sure the spelling's good, make sure your inventory's there, have great images. And that goes a long way to minimizing risk, I think, on Amazon.
Absolutely. I think that's really great and really useful advice. Can you tell me a little bit about the work you're doing on this business? So, tell me a little bit about the type of work you do for maintenance, and, if you're running this kind of passively, describe that to me a little bit.
My morning starts off at about 7 here in New Zealand, and the first thing I do is I always check feedback. That's just me. That's how I do it. I mean, it works for me. So I check the feedback and I respond to feedback. That's really important. It sort of goes back to the previous question about risk. If people see you responding to feedback and to reviews, they know that you're alive and that there's a real person looking and monitoring and caring about the customer experience. Are your customers delighted or not? And if they aren't delighted, can you make them delighted and then convert them into a return customer? That's huge. So, yeah, to get back, I answer feedback. Then I usually go through and scan for new reviews. After that, my wife, she is running the PPC and keyword analysis, and she's also checking what competitors are doing, keeping an eye on that. And I'll just check maybe a quick update from manufacturers and suppliers. How you're doing? How's the order coming along? Have you experienced any hiccups or anything? And we might also from time to time discuss if there's any improvements that we can make. But the general running of the business takes about half an hour to an hour per day.
All right. That's pretty great that you've managed to, whittle it down to about that much a day. It's pretty impressive. What skills or requirements are there for someone not familiar with this niche or business model?
Good question. Well, you need to be computer literate because it's all on. You need to be able to trust people. That's huge. I think that's not mentioned enough because you're doing it depends where your manufacturer is, of course. If your manufacturer is your next door neighbor, then maybe the trust isn't so much of an issue. But if you're sending a couple of $1,000s overseas to a complete stranger that you've never met, there's a huge amount of trust involved in that. Sometimes it's a two-way street. The manufacturers, they're going out on a limb to do something with you as well. So you have to have that attitude that you can trust someone without ever having met them and maybe never even actually physically speaking to them. It might have all have been done with just emailing. So that's a skill. I think you can develop that. I don't know if it's a skill, perhaps it's more of an attitude, but you definitely need to be patient. That's another skill you got to have, or an attitude. And because you might be dealing with people that don't speak English as a first language, and that can become extremely frustrating from time to time for both parties, of course, because they want to try to understand you. You want to try to understand them, but sometimes you're just banging your head against a wall. You got to stand up, you got to go outside, you got to breathe, have a cup of tea, maybe hand it over to your partner to deal with for a little bit, and just keep going. But definitely you do need computer skills. That's a must. Or else you need to find someone that has computer skills, a basic knowledge of like writing descriptions, maybe dealing with people. You have to the customer's always right. You don't want to get involved in an online war or a battle with a customer that's unhappy. I'd say don't do that. Try to just understand it from their point of view, empathize, bit of empathy. So yeah, I'm not really saying particular skills. I think it's more about a mindset that you have to have. That will probably get you through more than any sort of one skill. It's your mindset and your attitude towards risk, your attitude towards frustration and failure. Now, I'm sort of mentioning a few negatives here, but those are the things, it's the negatives that test you. When everything's going well, you're fine, you're flying, you're indestructible. But when things start turning bad, that's when you really need to dig deep and get yourself through it. So I'd just say mindset, just keep strong, keep hearty and remember why you started.
Absolutely. Like you said before, it's some of these things are the elements of running a business that people don't always think about up front or think about at first, trust and patience and focusing on having the right mindset. But again, it's like you said, everything you need in order to keep running the business when things get tough. So yeah, remembering how to overcome those challenges and what you need to do it, super important. I think very relevant for everyone listening. Just a last few questions to wrap things up. How much support are you offering buyers?
Oh, we can offer quite a lot of support. My wife and I are pretty flexible like that. We're helpful people by nature. We're already kind of coaching friends and family about FBA. We're very open. We're actually teachers too. So, we're used to that kind of thing, guiding people through, and we love it actually, seeing people grow and helping them to progress. So, yeah, we're prepared to put in a lot of time to help any prospective buyer or the buyer.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's always really helpful for potential buyers to hear what your attitude is about, your willingness to help them, and pretty cool that you're already a teacher, so you're set in that way. Last two things. Would you commit to a non-compete?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. And are you open to negotiating something like an earnout?
Yes, we are. We're always open to negotiation.
Great.
That's a key point of this.
Exactly. Awesome. Very cool. And one final thing, putting yourself in the shoes of a buyer, why do you think this is a business worth buying?
I think it's worth buying because it gives you balance in life. It provides you with, well, I'd say most people with an unprecedented amount of freedom to work. Most people are out there working 40 hours plus, grinding away, and maybe not for so much money. I know my wife and I have both been there before. But this business, I mean, it's allowed us to spend a lot of time with family, to have a lot of freedom. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking to get back a bit of control in your life, yes, there will be challenges that you'll face that you don't have to face in a normal job. But even normal jobs have their challenges. I think the reward of running a business like this far outweighs the other things that can come from being employed by somebody. I'd say if you're looking for time, getting some time back and some balance, and of course earning a lot of money and potential growth of these FBA businesses and Amazon in general. I mean, it's an amazing wave to be riding. Amazon's expanding it, unprecedented, I think, in the history of the world, human civilizations, of a company of this magnitude. And so if I was a potential buyer, that's what I'd be looking, that's what I'd be thinking. Yeah, this is for me for those reasons.
Yeah, that's a pretty great answer. Well, that's awesome, Josh. Is there anything I might have missed as we talked about your business today? Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think your questions have been comprehensive and covered everything really well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really looking forward to seeing how things play out for you. And yeah, it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. And if you want more information, the link will be below the video that'll take you to this marketplace listing. If you're watching this on the listing page and want more information, become a depositor today. When you make the deposit, one of our business analysts will be in contact with you and you'll be given everything you need to review this business. Have a great day.